Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us for today's live webinar event with Microsoft. The focus for our webinar today is preview to Visual Studio 2013, its new features, with the official launch for VS 2013 dated on the 13th of November. So more information how you could participate and attend the launch after Colin's presentation this afternoon. Colin will present some of the key features of VS 2013, including Code Lens, browser link, testing in the cloud, and more. I'm proud to be joined by my colleague, as I said, Colin Bales. He's Microsoft's Developer Tools Technical Specialist, and he's been in the business for as long, I would say 10 years or plus. So we'll go through the agenda briefly. Colin will introduce Visual Studio Editions, introduce Code Lens, talk about Windows 8.1 development, browser link, load testing in the cloud, and Colin will also do 2 demos on Code Lens and browser links. Hoping the presentation would last between 30 to 40 minutes, plus a few Q&A at the end. Before I pass you over to Colin, please feel free to type in your questions on your Q&A pad during the presentation, and we will hopefully answer all or most of your questions at the end of Colin's presentation. So without further delay, I now pass you over to my colleague Colin, who will present Visual Studio 2013. Colin?
Thank you very much, Mel. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in for today's session on what's new in Visual Studio 2013. I'm the Developer Tools Technical Specialist here in the UK. So it's a pleasure to be able to kind of do a session to you today to tell you some of the new features and functional areas. And because we're such a short session today, I'm going to drill straight into the sessions pretty quickly, the features, and we'll go through end-to-end some of the new features and bells and whistles that we've got available to you in the 2013 products. Just as a quick, before I do that, the only sort of slide really that's not to do with features, I just want to tell you that there has been no change in the way that you can obtain your Visual Studio. We're still sticking with the Professional, Premium, and Ultimate editions, and of course with Test Professional as our SKU for testers. All of these available with MSDN subscription. But I'm going to just look straight away into the functional areas and talk through some of the new improvements that we've made inside Visual Studio, and we'll get to some of the demos as well. So first of all, we've made some IDE improvements. The user interface, we've added a bit more clarity to some of the icons to enable you to differentiate those. We got a lot of feedback about color and such like within from the community, and so we're hoping that this helps a little way in terms of differentiating some of those icons and buttons. Another thing we got quite a lot of feedback on it with regards to user interface was in particular around Team Foundation Server and some of its panels, particularly the pending changes window, which was very much aligned to only being able to dock inside the Team Explorer window itself, and customers wanted to be able to float this, make it dock it to the bottom of their screen, and as you can see on the slide here, dock to the left-hand side of the screen. You can now pull out many of those Team Explorer windows, and hopefully that then gives you the ability to put that on a screen or a position that makes sense for you. Well, one of the major kind of improvements as far as the IDE goes is we've actually cloud-enabled the IDE. So you can sign in with a Microsoft account, or what used to be known as a Live ID. And enabling you to do that enables us to go to the cloud and actually start synchronizing some of your settings into the cloud, so that if you move to other workstations, you'll find that those settings will travel with you. Of course, you can turn that off if you don't want that to occur, but it's quite nice to be able to have that consistent look and feel that you like across all of your development workstations that you travel to. The other advantage of being able to be connected is that getting connectivity to the services such as Azure or Team Foundation service then become automatic because you've already aligned it to the account that you want to sign into. Moving kind of on in terms of the productivity, let's head to some of the scroll bar improvements that we've made. Basically, we borrowed some of the improvements that we put inside Power Tools to enable us to annotate the scroll bar and put kind of small glyphs into the scroll bar, so you can see from the slide here that we can see where breakpoints are, code changes, where things are found in file, where the caret is, that kind of stuff. So we've augmented that scroll bar position to enable you to see within the files very quickly where you want to go as you're traveling up and down the scroll bar. We've also changed the scroll bar to enable you to be able to map mode that scroll bar, so you get kind of the shape of your code and a preview window if you want at that position. Again, this just helps you move up and down your scroll bars to get to the code that you want to get to faster. We've done some pretty cool stuff in terms of auto brace completion, so enabling braces and kind of quotations to complete for you, making that typing just that little bit easier, taking that small bit of legwork out of it for you. And we've also included a way to move either single lines or multiple lines using the Alt cursor up and down combo, enabling you to move lines or multiple lines up and down in the window. And again, this sort of proves very useful rather than necessarily kind of cutting, pasting a lot of stuff a lot of times. One of the features I really love in the editor is I used to get quite frustrated with kind of go to definition, in the fact that go to definition is great when you F12 something, but it kind of takes you out of the context of the work that you're actually currently doing. So it's really nice to see that we've implemented a peak definition view, so you can literally hover onto something, do Alt F12, and we'll peek into that definition rather than go into this, which means that you're entirely in context of the document that you're working with. You can, of course, take one of these windows that you pop open to actually then make it actually appear in the full document well if you want. But you can also interact with this as its own document in line with your actual code. That's a really nice new feature to keep you in context. So we have a new feature called Code Lens that I'm going to demonstrate for you. Ultimately, Code Lens is a heads-up display for your code. I like to think of this as, if I look at some code at any point in time, I can tell what that code does, or at least hopefully I can hope that I can tell what that code does. But what I can't tell is things about almost the history of that code, how that code was created, what other members of my team have worked on this particular method in the past, how many references does this code have, or how many references does code have to this particular method, and therefore, what is the risk of me changing this particular code. So what I'm going to do now is actually share my screen out and actually just show you this within the product. So I'm going to just flip to share my screen. And bring up my virtual machine here. So what I've got here is some code within Visual Studio. And what you can see is that this line of code here above this create, actually if I move up and down, you'll see that it's not actually in my code itself. It's an annotation into this code base, whereby it's not a line of code, but it kind of tells me detail about this code that I've got currently. I can see, for example, that there are 2 references to this code, and I can click on that and see this data of actually where those references are and obviously I can do things like expand that out into things like code maps if I so choose, and get a map of this code and how it relates to other code in a diagram kind of way, nice visual way. Assuming that's the case, we can see that we can then go to see other pieces of data, such as the numbers of users that have previously been involved in this code base. In this instance, I can see that Brian Keller is the current user, and 2 other changes were made to this method. So if I head up on here, I can retrieve information on that, and I'll see that what users have been involved in this particular method at any point in time. So we can see that there. We can see the total number of changes as well at any point in time as well. So that's a nice way to kind of see that. Another thing that you can do, assuming that you run your unit tests at some point, so I could probably do with bringing up these test runs, is actually I can see information about this code and the test runs that are currently happening. So here I can see when I actually run these unit tests, that one of these tests is passing, but one of them is failing. And again, I can bring up that data in line and see the tests that are passing and the tests that are failing at any point in time. Of course, this means when I do eventually go and fix this problem, it would be very quick for me to select the Run All button, and it will just run these tests that are contextual to this method here, rather than running the whole superset of tests that I have here within Test Explorer. And that's a nice way when you're actually fixing code to be quite contextual and be able to see that. I will now just flip back to my slides and stop sharing. Right. So other things that we've changed is that we've decided to unify the performance and diagnostic tools that we have in Visual Studio. So things like the profiler that were there before have now been added to additionally by other tools. And what we wanted to do is go to a hub-based model whereby, regardless of the type of application that you're using, we could give you contextually the performance and diagnostic tools that are available to you at any point in time. So if for example, if you're writing a Windows 8.1 application, of course we've got the profiling tools that we would have ordinarily for code, but we also have some new tools like a UI responsiveness analyzer that gives you response rate and frames per second that you've got available to you. If you want to see your Windows 8.1 app and how much energy it's using, so CPU responsiveness, we'll be able to do that. Of course, we can get easy access to these all-in-one based on that. Let's just pop that through. We've increased our debugging tools to have further debugging tools in line, and we've got a great new memory dump analysis tool that enables us to analyze a managed memory dump, so we don't need to go into tools like WinDBG anymore and actually see that in line. What you can do with that new memory dump analysis capability is you can actually compare test dumps together, and so you can see that happens at that point in time. In terms of IntelliTrace, we've improved IntelliTrace to actually now not just have the normal kind of debugging history and the ability to go back through time, but we can also see the performance metrics regarding a method. So you can see slow running methods, as well as ones that are running nice and quickly, which is great. With regards to Windows 8.1 development, we've done some great new enhancements to the tooling here, and you'll see that the layout application design has been improved for both XAML and HTML apps. So you've got kind of guidelines mapped to that kind of nice-to-use features that enable you to kind of use the designers a little bit easier than previously. Including things like some great new sample data support through a data panel that enables us to see test data in line. Of course, because Windows 8.1 enables us to deal with more resolutions, we've enhanced the device panel to enable us to run to those resolutions. And with regards to kind of HTML and CSS, we've got a kind of new timeline for animations within Windows Store HTML apps. With regards to further into some of these editors and such like, we've gone into the XAML editor and made some great IntelliSense improvements. So if you're doing IntelliSense data binding or something like using resources, you'll see that now within your XAML you can actually get IntelliSense that you previously couldn't. And if you're doing things like doing go to definition, we'll go to the right place at the right time within your XAML, which is a really nice feature for being able to navigate around, be able to use XAML more effectively. The really cool thing I like about this is a XAML editor improvement with IntelliSense that actually enables us to be able to take those same XAML improvements and see those for other application types, like WPF applications is a good example. Another thing we've done there is for both store apps that are HTML or XAML based, you've actually got a new starting point in terms of when you do file new project. We've created new templates to improve the starting point for any new applications that you're creating. And if you're using technologies like Windows Azure Mobile Services, we've integrated that into the experience so you can very quickly and tightly couple or tightly easily use those services into your applications, and it feels a more cohesive experience when using that technology. I mentioned the UI responsiveness analyzer that you've got for Windows Store applications and the energy consumption profiler earlier. So you can see the frames per second as you're moving through your application. Make sure that it's working nice and smoothly for your users, and see that you're not draining the power of kind of either sort of phone or tablet devices that you may well be working with. We've also improved the testing tools within our coded UI support to enable the Windows Store applications to now be automated. So any automated testing that you're writing, you can now do within this type of application also. With regards to web development, we've made a lot of improvements here as well. One of the things I really like is the fact that we've unified ASP.NET. What we saw with a lot of customers is that they're starting to use or have used many parts of ASP.NET, whether that be web forms, MVC, web API, and they tend to bring these together into single applications anyway. So we actually enable you when you're starting ASP.NET applications now to move and actually select multiples of these technologies to be used into a single application. So you can pick and choose and use these in an easier way.
Hi, Colin. Sorry, can I interrupt just for a few seconds?
Yeah, sure.
Just to let you know, this is for the audience. If you want to full screen or enlarge your view, please do click on your full screen at the top of your screen, especially when Colin is doing the browser link demo, and just click on full screen again to go back to the normal view. So, Colin, sorry, apologies.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Mal. Great that people would be able to see this in a full screen mode. Okay, so let's just close down this document I've been working with previously. What we've done inside the tools now is actually increase and make working with multiple browsers much simpler than it's been in the past. So, of course, in the past we could launch an application within a browser of our choice, whether that be IE, Chrome, that kind of a different browser experience, and start debugging those particular applications in line. So this is me launching this particular application within Internet Explorer, and we can see that load up. But we may well, and many customers will be using multiple browsers and want to do their testing across multiple browsers. So we can see that we can obviously bring in that, in scope, that application type as well. One of the things that we enable you to do through something called Browser Link is actually have these multiple browsers connected to Visual Studio. So we can see here I've got connections now to Chrome and Internet Explorer by virtue of bringing up that URL. And basically, SignalR is sat behind these two browser windows and the Visual Studio editor that enable me to make a change. Let's say take this application, maybe I want to take this support and make it say something completely different. Maybe I'll have it say something like, hello world. And then I can literally come into here and refresh my connected browsers. And what that will do is if I head to either Chrome or IE, by the time it's done its refresh, is actually it will refresh into these different connected browsers. There's Chrome and IE, and I can see that change across the different connected browsers that we've got. Because this uses SignalR behind the scenes, actually this means that it will work across a whole host of different browsers and devices. So you could even have a mobile device maybe running something like Safari connected to this and actually be able to refresh this and have those update in line within part of this. So a nice way of doing cross-browser kind of development and making sure that you can see what you expect when you're developing. I will just head back into my slides at this point in time. Okay, so of course, with the new version of Visual Studio is a new version of the framework. It's a point release of .NET 4.5.1, and so we've made some improvements here for you. So some of the things that I really like, just to pull out a few things. We now have edit and continue enabled for 64-bit applications. So gone are the days of that dialog popping up in 64-bit mode to say you can't do this. You'll now be able to use this just as you could within 32-bit applications. You can inspect the return value now when you're in the debugger. So as you're returning from a method, you'll see the value that was returned from that method. And, again, this is just a nice debugging improvement of something that I think we've been waiting for some time, that enables our debugging sessions to go that much smoother. In terms of debugging as well, of course, more and more applications are being asynchronous now, and these are, obviously to the new application development models like Windows Store applications has become even more key to our development. So the ability to actually do asynchronous debugging now and actually see what stuff is in progress and not started, scheduled, that kind of thing is a really nice improvement to the tooling to enable us to do debugging there. We've also got some nice, neat improvements in terms of things like ADO.NET, which now does a retry pattern for connection resiliency. And you'll see that frameworks like Entity Framework 6 will take this kind of connection resiliency and take that into those frameworks as well, enabling your code to look that a little bit leaner and not need to do so many exception handling and retry logic within your own code. Of course, as far as things like application performance, we've made improvements. So things like the multi-core JIT has improved, enabling us to be run a bit faster in that instance. And ASP.NET application suspension enables applications to start up faster as well. A bit that we've had feedback for a subset of our customers who are making a good use of the large object heap is that it was really hard to compact that, or not possible to compact that in those instances. And so people who were suffering from the kind of effects of that not being available now can actually rectify that, because we can on demand do a large object heap compaction to enable the garbage collector to come and compact and make things better there. Of course, we've done all the work to make sure that consistent performance will be available to you from .NET 4.5 and .NET 4.5.1. So things are only going to get better there. In terms of the tool, we've obviously done a lot of work within Visual Studio with our application lifecycle management tools, so within Team Foundation Server and how it integrates with Visual Studio. One of the things that I really like here is that we've done some work in what we call the Agile portfolio management. And this is really taking the notion of you having a group of user stories and be able to deal with it at a superset level. So you may well have a bunch of different stories, let's say for argument's sake, they're all to do with different social integration products, so Facebook, LinkedIn, those kind of things. And you may define all of those different stories, but you may well have a feature that kind of sits above that, or you may call it an epic that is, social integration being the feature. And we now enable you to track that feature of kind of social integration and its sort of child user stories. And you can define those, obviously those user stories within an individual sprint. But you can have this superset, this feature, be tracked across potentially different sprints of development. So it's enabling us to create a nice portfolio of work that we're working on. Of course, that helps within enabling us to also issue that across multiple sprint teams. So to break down our particular feature into user stories that then can go into individual Scrum teams to actually to be delivered upon. We've improved the way that we track our work within Team Foundation Server through some reporting that we put in called work item charting. This enables us to get very simple visualizations across work item queries that we may well have in Team Foundation Server. So we can get things like pie charts and pivot tables and such like that enable us to express the data that we would have otherwise just seen as lists in a nice sort of visualization. One of the bits that seems to have gone down really well with the development community is that we've actually, of course, we've noticed that people were using distributed version control more. So we've integrated the popular distributed version control system, Git, into Team Foundation Server. So we have full Git support within TFS now. So this is integrated within the product, within the service, within Team Foundation Server, and of course Team Foundation Service as the cloud-based version of the same server-based tool, which is really nice to enable development teams to choose the version control system that they feel suits their needs best. The great thing I like about this as well is the fact that Visual Studio has Git support as well, which enable us obviously to connect to our Team Foundation Server or service-based projects. But if we're using kind of third-party Git repositories, maybe something like GitHub, we're able to directly interact with those through Visual Studio also directly from the tools. We noticed that, well, we wanted to make it easier for teams to collaborate, project teams. And so within Microsoft, we often work within what we call a team room, and we try and get all of the developers together in the same room as much as possible. But of course, this isn't always possible. Even within Microsoft, there's a multi-geography based teams across different geographies. So we've enabled a feature called Team Room, which enables team members to collaborate together in kind of a timeline view. So I like to think of this you imagine an almost Facebook type timeline for your development project that give you information about the TFS project that you're working on, the builds that are completing, the check-ins that are happening, the work items that are closing, being edited, code reviews that are being done. And of course, this is augmented by just general team chatter that also can go in line with this particular window, enabling us to kind of go do that and interact together nicely. We've also enhanced, in terms of collaboration, being able to use the web-based tooling that we've got to actually go to our code and make comments on change sets that have been committed to the version control repository, almost to do kind of lightweight code reviews. And this was mentioned and covered in a previous Test House last week's webinar. So if you didn't get a chance to see that, please feel free to go to the recording of that. But we covered the feature of load testing in the cloud, which has now been introduced within Visual Studio 2013 to enable us to, on demand, be able to generate the agents and controllers in the cloud that are required to actually generate load against your servers, whether they be on premises or in the cloud. So you're generating the load, so rather than actually having to install infrastructure and machines to run a load test, we can run those from the cloud in a very simple to do way. And literally this is almost as simple as you design the test as you've done previously, but when you come to execute, you choose that you want to run them from the cloud as a radio button rather than running them from local infrastructure and supplying the test controller that you're going to be running your load tests from. As far as testing goes, we've done some great work within the web-based tool within Team Foundation Server, so that we can actually get a better experience for working with test cases. We can create and define test plans and test suites, as well as interact with those test cases that we put into those test suites, all from within the web-based user interface. Of course, we still have the Microsoft Test Manager tooling for being able to do very richer kind of tracing of what testers are doing. But this is a really nice way to do this through a web interface, particularly where tooling like Microsoft Test Manager isn't available. So maybe platforms like a Mac, you're still able to run your test cases, or in environments that are very locked down that you're not allowed to install Visual Studio tools into. You're able to then go and work with your test cases all from a web-based user interface. One of the things that customers often want to do is actually work with different environments, and they want to automate or certainly keep a consistent way of doing deployments into these different environments that they have. Let's say like a development environment, a QA environment, and a production environment. And we created or we acquired a product called AirinRelease that actually enables us to do this using workflows to actually script out the process of and automate the process of deployment and be able to replay that back in a consistent way for different environments that you've got. The really nice thing about then getting to a nice consistent way of kind of moving between these platforms is that we can then put on top of this an approval workflow whereby the necessary parties involved in these different environments that you may well have. So maybe your QA lead needs to give the nod and an approval before anything can move from a development environment into that QA environment. And as and when they give that approval, then the automated deployment can actually occur. It will go on to those machines in that environment in a nice, consistent way that can be tested as you move through development and QA, all the way then through to you being able to do that onto a production machine, set of machines, that then know that that automation process has actually been tested previously in development and QA, making it able to then go into robustly into your production environment. Now, of course, these different features that I mentioned occur at different levels of Visual Studio. So I'll leave this slide kind of up because it's very chatty in terms of what's in there. But I'll now invite any questions that you may well have come through. So if I hand over to Mel, she should have the questions that have been coming in during the session.
Marvelous. Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you for the excellent presentation and definitely for giving us a sneak peek on Visual Studio 2013. Before we move on to the questions, I mentioned earlier about a launch that Microsoft are doing. Let me quickly go through the slide. So basically, Microsoft are organizing a special launch on Visual Studio 2013 on Tuesday, the 3rd of December at the NDC conference in London. That is, the venue is in Excel in East London. So it's a whole day launch event. So please don't miss out the UK launch and do register your details today. It's on your screen at the moment. So there'll be deep dive sessions. For the tester's point of view, we have some sessions on the day which include things like mobile apps testing, Windows, Azure, and more. So if I leave the slide there for a couple of minutes, just to let you know that, so please do register today if you could, or please do invite some of your colleagues to register for that event. It will be a really good event for Visual Studio 2013 users. Again, as Colin says, we are now taking questions for this webinar. So we'll take maybe a few, and then, as always, we can take some of this offline. So please do type your questions on your Q&A pod now. I've got a few questions coming here, Colin. So let me try and give them to you now. So the first question is, can I use the IDE without connecting to a Microsoft account? Colin?
Okay, yeah, so this will be around the fact that I mentioned you could log in and synchronize your changes with Visual Studio 2013. Absolutely, you don't have to connect it with a Microsoft account. Of course, you'll lose the benefit of the roaming synchronization settings if you choose not to. If you want to connect up to Azure or into Team Foundation Service, you'll have to go through the normal authentication process. But yeah, it's kind of a choice as to whether you then want to do that login. You don't have to do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Colin. Couple more questions here. Are there any plans for T-Room clients outside of the browser?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. So, in effect, when you think about the Team Room, there's a web client, obviously, within Visual Studio 2013. We're already starting to see people in the community build on an API that we've built on top of Team Rooms. So actually, we already have a community project where a Team Room has now been enabled within Visual Studio itself rather than within the web browser. And of course, there's nothing stopping you going to write applications, therefore, and put them onto, let's say, a Windows Phone application, maybe a tablet application, or maybe even, for other platforms, iOS, Android, being able to develop against that API and have that Team Room then available to you, even if you were out the office, let's say, you'd still be able to collaborate with your team and see what was going on.
great. Thanks, Colin. I've got one question here. It might be quite a long question for you. CodeLens is only available in Ultimate. Is this something that would be useful for all developers? But this would mean upgrading everyone to Ultimate. Sorry. The question is, I think, is expensive. So I'm not sure if Colin, you want to take that.
CodeLens is in the Ultimate edition of Visual Studio, along with a lot of our visualization functionality, load testing functionality, and of course IntelliTrace, which again is like a real value add to all developers. So you need to, please feel free to evaluate all of these different technologies because they're a great time saver for your developers, making them all more kind of productive as they're doing their day-to-day work. But yeah, I'm not sure there's really a question there, so to speak.
Okay. Thank you, Colin. I've got one here as well. Can Visual Studio 2012 and 2013 work side by side on same machine? Yeah,
absolutely. No problems running even like 2010, 2012, and 2013. Yeah, you can do that without any problems.
Perfect. One more question, Colin, for you. Can Visual Studio 2013 launch solutions from VS 2012?
Okay, yep, and this is very similar to the previous question,
yep.
in terms of what we did when we moved between TFS 2010 to 2012. We brought in something called solution round tripping, which meant that we didn't make that rather annoying change to the solution files. That meant that developers couldn't have different versions of Visual Studio. We've continued that same line of thinking for Visual Studio 2013. So actually, you can take a solution all the way down to Visual Studio 2010 through Visual Studio 2012 and on to 2013. So your developers can be in the tools that make sense for them at any point in time. Obviously, all of the latest and greatest features, light up within the later tools. But absolutely, it means that almost customers wanting to do kind of phased migration of developers onto different tools, they can do that without any troubles.
Perfect. Thank you, Colin. Next question. Can TFS 2013 work with VS 2012?
Yes, Team Foundation Server 2013 will work with Visual Studio 2012. Visual Studio 2012 has a number of updates to it, which updates have features and bug fixes. So the latest version of those updates is update 4, so we refer to it as Visual Studio 2012.4. If you install that, that's what you want to install on your clients, your Visual Studio machines, and then they can have a work fine with Team Foundation Server 2013. So you can upgrade your server in that instance and actually still work with that in the other tools.
Perfect. Another one for you, Colin. Not sure if you could answer this or if you want to take it offline maybe. Question is, what about setup projects in VS 2013? Have you made a rollback to the way it was in VS 2010?
Okay, so setup projects are still the same as is in 2012, so we haven't brought those back into the product. Feel free to kind of put your feedback around onto the user voice site. That way we get that consolidated feedback around these other features that you want. So that's where I would suggest that you log that desire for setup projects to come back.
Perfect. Okay, I'll just take the last question, Colin, and then if you do have any other questions, please do type it on your Q&A pod, and we'll take this offline. The last question would be, when are we able to purchase Visual Studio 2013?
Okay, so if you have MSDN, you can get that today. Go to MSDN and go and download that. There are trials as well that are available to download today from the Microsoft website. If you want to buy that and you don't currently have MSDN, you'll have to wait till early December, I think, November even, Yeah, we've just, and if I remember rightly, it's on the 11th you're able to then purchase that without MSDN at that point in time. So that's when that will be available to non-MSDN users. But yeah, cool.
Thank you, Colin. That wraps up our presentation for today. As always, the recording will be available within the next couple of days. Again, before we go, if you do have any further questions regarding VS 2013, please do drop me and Colin a line. Thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon, and hope to see you at the next webinar. Sorry, Colin, do you want to say anything before we go, or?
No, thanks very much, everyone, for your time. Feel free to drop us email if you have any feedback or questions.
Marvelous. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.